It might be a lot of pressure for the entire hopes and dreams of a state to rest on J.J. McCarthy's shoulders, but fret not. He is built for this, and he has been since before he was born. Welcome to the Everyman series on the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thank you so much to those of you who have come and listened to me every other day, I guess, as I am still out of town, and this is still kind of a pre-recorded slowdown thing. We'll be back to full-on daily shows Monday through Friday next week. But for now, we press onward. If you're new here, hello and welcome. This is usually a show that is Monday through Friday, and you can find it wherever you find your favorite podcasts. Just search out Locked On Vikings on any podcasting app like SiriusXM, or you can find it on YouTube or Amazon Fire and Roku. Just download the Locked On Minnesota Sports app. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Today on Locked On Vikings, we are premiering, I guess, season premiere of the Everyman series, something that I have done on Locked On Vikings now every single year that I have been able to host this show. So 2019 was the first year of this. That would make this year 5 of the Everyman series on Locked On Vikings. And actually, as I was a writer before, the blog where I wrote before I came on Locked On Vikings, I did it there too. So this is actually year 7 of the Everyman series. It's my favorite thing that I do in all of Vikings coverage. The season, the draft, that's all very fun, but this is where I get to really be me, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate everybody who's come and listened to it. We are going through the backstory of every single new Viking. So if they were on the roster last summer, then I did them in last year's version of this. And you can go still find that. That's all still up. So if you really want to know about the story of Ivan Pace or Justin Jefferson or Christian Darrisaw or any of those guys, you can still find that. But for now, Jaron Halls is particularly fun, if I recall. But today, we're going to launch with all of the new Vikings. There are 45 new Vikings on the 90-man roster. Half of them are new, a lot of turnover. So we've got a lot of work to do, and we're going to start where else? With the new quarterback, J.J. McCarthy. J.J. McCarthy was built for this. When I say he was built for this, I mean his whole life was pointed directly and focused on being an NFL quarterback. And whether or not you think that makes for a better quarterbacking prospect in the NFL, or if you just think that that privilege carried him and he's actually a huge fraud, it doesn't matter. The point that I want you to come away from this is just how much there is in the football industrial complex that can take a young child that likes to whip things around his living room and mold him into somebody that is meant to be an NFL quarterback, and it's ordained by God. It's amazing. And it truly starts before he was born. You probably saw a clip from the Rich Eisen show that went really viral on Twitter. If you haven't, I'll try to put it up if I can on the screen here if you're watching on YouTube. But it's J.J. McCarthy's dad is holding a camcorder at his very pregnant wife. You should know that Jim McCarthy, JJ's dad, was a football player. He was an athlete. His mother, Megan, was a competitive figure skater. So you've already got this family of athletics. And Megan is laying on the hospital bed, about to have her baby. And dad's pointing the camcorder at her and saying oh, he's going to be daddy's little quarterback, before Megan says well, only if he wants to, and scolds him for being presumptuous. But I don't know if he was manifesting or if there was a real plan here, because Jim McCarthy had J.J. McCarthy in youth football basically right away. And they'll tell stories of him running around as this hyper energetic toddler, whipping things around and breaking things, as toddlers do. But of course, in hindsight, it makes for this lovely story. But he had him in youth football right away. And immediately he could tell that there was a sort of special instinct. Youth football is, we'll go with chaotic, right? It's kids running around. They don't necessarily do the right thing. They're not going to execute a plan with any precision. It's very different from what we think of as football, what we're used to watching on TV. Of course it is. It's kids. And his ability to kind of navigate through that was pretty natural. And that came out even more when he played his second love, which was hockey. Maybe he got the ice part of his gene pool. And in hockey, you know, he had, again, like even as like a 13-year-old hockey player, like a freshman in high school, he had this like sixth sense for where the puck was going to be and what angle and what angle to take and what the other team was going to do. And he was operating at too young of an age to have like the experience to know, all right, when the wing goes there, I go here. And it's instinct. It was all instinct. It's all just like this kind of spatial awareness. And look, when you're in youth football from the age of like 5, 6, I don't have the exact age, but when you're in youth football with your dad as the head coach, I don't think I mentioned that Jim McCarthy was the head coach of the youth football team, putting his kid at quarterback. You're going to develop that instinct the same way, you know, any 6-year-old is going to be more well-versed in an iPad than you and me, even though, you know, we were pretty young when those things came out too. It's just one of those things that as a very like moldable, tiny little child brain, if you grow up in that, then you have it as instinctually as you have, you know, speaking your first language. So that is one thing. Youth football, dad is the head coach, putting him in at quarterback right away, right? The next thing that we see that sort of portends that this is not just going to be a kid in an after-school sport, that there's really a future here. It's 6th grade for J.J. McCarthy. And he's a youth football phenom, right? And, you know, all of the youth coaches are like clamoring about him to all the high school coaches and stuff because everybody talks. And he decides that he wants to hang out. He wants to start like getting in close with Nazareth Academy. And by the way, talk about preordained, right? Like Nazareth. Nazareth Academy is in LaGrange Park, Illinois, and it's one of the best football programs in that area of Illinois. And he wanted to go there, and his dad wanted him to go there. And so he asked, hey, can I work out with, he was in 6th grade. He said, can I work out with the football team if I just show up? And, you know, sure, why not, right? You're free country. You can come hang out and go run around with us. Why not? Like, we won't stop you. But hey, we get here at 6 a.m. and you're 12 years old. So good luck. Or 11 or whatever he was. But he showed up and he dutifully worked out and he started to develop a relationship with Tim Rackey, who was the head coach at Nazareth Academy. So this sort of starts this trend of J.J. McCarthy being about 2 years ahead of a normal high school student's development schedule. He's in 6th grade, starting to get to know the football team. Sometimes you'll get 8th graders that, you know, show up maybe after school in like May. They're about to graduate middle school. They're about to join the football program. So they'll show up and say hi real quick. There's maybe a meeting with the parents. No, this is fully 2 years in advance. In the meantime, he's, you know, still running around and impressing everybody in the youth program. And then in 8th grade, it gets sort of kicked up to 11. It hits a little booster platform and starts going a million miles per hour when Jim McCarthy takes his kid to his old alma mater for a football camp where there are some important people that can start to get some eyeballs on this kid. That's coming up next on the Locked On Vikings podcast. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. No matter what's going on in the wide world of sports right now, baseball season in full swing. So you can go gamble on some baseball games. You can gamble on stuff. Caitlin Clark in full swing with the Indiana Fever. You can go gamble on her. You can gamble on some NFL futures as well. If you think the Vikings can maybe steal the division, there's some good odds out there on that. A lot of value there. So head on over to FanDuel.com. And if you're new, sign up at FanDuel.com/lockedon. You can get $150 back in bonus bets if your first bet wins. So go lay down some easy money line somewhere. A $5 bet on that, you can get $150 back. That's 30-1 odds just for signing up at FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Thanks a million for listening to the Everyman series on the Locked On Vikings podcast. When you're done here, if you want some more traditional Minnesota Vikings talk, if I have missed a major news story because I'm out of town and this is all pre-recorded, go check out Locked On Minnesota Sports. I'm sure they're talking about it there. I'm sure they're talking about whatever's going on with the Timberwolves and the Twins and the Wilds offseason and all that. So go check all of that out. And there is a 24/7 live stream. So just kick that thing on. You'll catch all of the major Minnesota sports shows, including roundtables and all that. Go check it out. We pick back up in North Central College in Naperville, Illinois, which is a suburb of Chicago, about an hour outside the city proper. And J.J. McCarthy goes there and throws the ball around a little bit, and he gets somebody's eye. That somebody is Matt Campbell, head coach of the Iowa State Cyclones, and some of the recruiters and staff that Iowa State has at this event. They pull him aside. And before Jim, as Jim McCarthy tells this story, by the way, if you're looking for sources on all of this stuff, I have a big old list of them in the description for where I got all of this information. None of this is my own original reporting. I feel like I should be upfront about that. This is all kind of compiled from other write-ups throughout his college career, and I'm just kind of trying to tell you the story. But it's like this image of like eventually like a dozen people are like flocking to him, like you threw birds, like you threw a crumb of bread into a flock of pigeons. And eventually they kind of pull him aside and they say, hey, we've got this other football camp happening in Ames, Iowa, where Iowa State is, this in a couple of weeks. Why don't you come there for a weekend? Keep in mind, this is in 8th grade. J.J. McCarthy still has not started high school football, and Matt Campbell is like talking to him, trying to say, why don't you come to our football camp? You'd be maybe surprised, unless you are well-versed in this. Maybe you've had a kid go through this or something, or maybe you went through this. I don't know who you are. But that's not actually that weird, apparently. Like that's a thing that recruiters will do. They'll try to identify the kind of the phenoms that are going to come up through a certain program, especially if you're going to go to a prestigious football program like Nazareth has a very good reputation in Illinois. They'll just take you in and just start to like try to build that relationship with you so that when it is time to commit, they've known you for like you've known them for 3 years and they're probably that much more likely to pick you. So Matt Campbell takes him to this Iowa State. It's like this, spring Saturday camp, like youth camp, basically. And he goes and throws around there and does the workouts and everything. And he impresses everybody enough there where Matt Campbell actually offers him a scholarship right there on the spot. He has not yet played high school football. He's not even started the summer program of high school football. And he is already getting college scholarships. It's not long before the University of Illinois follows suit. And basically for the rest of his high school football career, colleges are going to be clamoring over this guy. He's going to have recruiters in his ear all the time. There's another very flowery write-up. I think it's from The Athletic or the Chicago Tribune. I've gotten them all mixed up, but there's a whole bunch from the Chicago Tribune and a bunch from the Detroit Free Press after he went to Michigan too. So you can find a lot of really great write-ups about his experience. And in one of them, he knocks on the door where McCarthy is, and he opens the door and he sees another person who's, over the age of 23 and says, okay, hey coach, what's up? It's like, that's a reporter, but he's talked to so many coaches and recruiters that it's like a reasonable assumption to make. And it just goes to show just how much of a whirlwind the next 4 years are going to be, really the next 2 years, because he's going to decide by the end of sophomore year. As a freshman, he does have to quit hockey, eventually has to make that choice. So he does quit hockey to sort of focus on the one that's giving him scholarships. Pretty prudent move there. And his high school career kicks off pretty hard. Now, when he shows up to the field, he should be varsity quarterback. If it were just pure meritocracy, he would be varsity quarterback. But hey, he's a freshman, and Tim Rackey wants to kind of keep him humble. And so he's going to play a little varsity, he's going to play a little JV, a little bit with the freshmen. There's 3 teams on this high school. So he's going to sort of bounce around between all of them, get to know his teammates, keep a small head, that kind of thing. And he says he's really, really happy that he did that because it let J.J. McCarthy get really close to all of his the teammates that he would end up playing with all 3 years, right? That were also freshmen. He got to play with them and get to know them and be a leader and just sort of grow in a humble context. Because again, this kid's 13, 14 years old. There's still maturing to be done. And you don't want you don't want a kid that age with that much potential to get a big head and ruin it. So he's really happy that he did that. But come sophomore year, he's the bona fide starting varsity quarterback. Now he's kind of had that year of like bouncing around. And to his credit, JJ McCarthy never really had an issue with any of that. He was happy to say whatever coach wanted, do whatever coach wanted him to do. He was happy to get to know his teammates. But by sophomore year, he was the guy. And I want to take you now to Thanksgiving of that year. It was actually the end of that season. I think they had been either undefeated or they had maybe lost one game. And now they're about to play in the Class 7A, which is the second highest class in the entire state of Illinois, and in the state championship for that division. Problem is, J.J. McCarthy has a broken thumb on his throwing hand, but he wants to play through it. And this is a really important window into the psyche that has been built for this kid. Remember, he has been Mr. Quarterback, either from the encouragement and support of his dad, all the way through his relationship with the high school football head coach, showing up at 6 a.m. to workouts. He has been Mr. Quarterback since probably before he can even remember at this point. And that mentality has caused a 15 to 16-year-old kid to want to play in the state championship with a broken thumb. Yeah, it's going to hurt. And yeah, I probably won't even put out the best tape, but I got to be there for my teammates, right? And it's funny, there's almost this tragedy to it. It's this kid that didn't get a childhood, that has been, preparing for the combine since he was 2 years old. But at a certain point, you get old enough where you can either kind of embrace this life and decide to accelerate your path by making decisions like this, by working out with a personal trainer at the age of 10, which his parents also got him. Or you can kind of say, I'm not that into football. You can kind of half-ass it. You can make that decision, right? And J.J. McCarthy very much went gung-ho and became the kind of kid that wants to play to the state championship with a broken thumb. But you got to go get clearance from a doctor. So they go find an orthopedic surgeon who is willing to see them on Thanksgiving. And he's sitting in their office. They see him and he says, yeah, you know what? You're going to be cleared to play, but you've got some risk of injury, but not so much. I'll clear you to play, but no, you probably shouldn't. And he's like, nah, I'm going to do it. 210 yards. They win the state championship by like 21 points. 201 for a high school kid for a sophomore quarterback on varsity football. That's kind of crazy, right? And it gets even more attention on him. Now it's that spring where things start to get real, where colleges are no longer just sort of watching from afar. Offers are coming in. Conversations are being had. Now, this whole time, J.J. McCarthy's grown up as a diehard Ohio State fan. He is big, Buckeye till I die. And he talks to Ryan Day. Ohio State is into him. This is his dream. This is his 1A. This is his school. And they tell him it's the spring, and they tell him, hey, we like you. We've got these other couple of recruits we're talking to. We're not going to decide who gets this scholarship until the summer, though. So relax. It's okay. Like we're going to take our time. It's going to be a long process. And then suddenly he gets the call that they have offered a scholarship to Kyle McCord, who would end up being the quarterback there at Ohio State, sort of step for step with J.J. McCarthy, and that, they're not going to take him anymore. He felt pretty betrayed by this. This is a 16-year-old kid, too. Like, this is not somebody with the social coping skills to be like, it's a business and they went the way they went. And he does say that now because now he knows what to say, but he was pissed. He was mad about that. And there's this great quote that he was like, I grew up loving Ohio State. Now I want to kill them. And I love that, right? That rivalry stuff. But you've still got Michigan, you still have Northwestern, you've still got, Iowa State and Illinois, all these other Big Ten schools, or B1G, I should say, schools that are clamoring over him. And so he starts going on other visits, and he has the kind of classic story you hear from everybody who picks a college where they go, oh my, this just felt so right. The family and the brotherhood. And he felt like Ohio State was so cold and calculated at him, right? That it was not like the fact that he was a fan of Ohio State turned out not to matter. And I think he was burned by that. So the sort of softy, lovey-dovey Jim Harbaugh thing, I think really landed because he ends up picking Michigan. With all of that in the rearview mirror, he takes on his junior year of high school football at Nazareth Academy. And again, they find themselves in the Class 7A state championship. But this time, it doesn't go so great. It's kind of a rainy day. the team that they're playing is like kind of blitz heavy and has them under pressure all the time. He ends up completing just 8 of 25 passes and they get worked. So it's an L. And JJ McCarthy didn't know this yet, but that would be his last game at Nazareth Academy. And I think that really stuck with him and it bugged him. That whole loss bugged him. This would be a good time to talk about the whiteboard in his bedroom. This is how like broken this brain is. This is a 17-year-old boy with a whiteboard in his bedroom. And it's like not that crazy for like, you know, young athletes to like kind of think of themselves as the protagonist of a sports movie and to have like motivational quotes, you know, from Kobe Bryant and Tom Brady up on their whiteboard. But I don't know if it's super normal for them to write their own, which JJ McCarthy did. He writes his own quotes. Like, sure, man. But I don't know. It's the kind of like sappy blunder years thing. I'm sure that all of us have some version of that, right? That we did when we were like 15, 16, whatever. But he like writes up plays on this thing and motivational quotes. And on it, he writes 37-13. That was or 36-13. It's disputed. When I looked up the score, it said 37-13, but all the stories about this said 36-13. So I wonder if somebody just got it wrong. Anyways, it doesn't matter. He writes the score of that game and he says, you know, I will be better and stronger from this. That is written up on the whiteboard that he sees every single day and every single night when he goes to bed. That game really bugged him. The way he learned how to deal with that, I think, is the next big lesson that life had for him. So that's what we're going to talk about next. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by Gametime. Gametime is the best place to find last-minute tickets, whether you are going to a sporting event like a Twins game, or perhaps you are going to a concert, theater, some other event, anything you got to buy tickets for, and you maybe need to buy those tickets last minute because you're either just a bad planner or maybe you are trying to save a buck by pushing it right to the last second. Gametime's perfect for that. And even an hour into the event, you can still get tickets. So if you just decide, man, this game's kind of interesting, what if we rolled over and went, you can find tickets at Gametime. You can save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, whatever it is, because at a certain point, people are just trying to get rid of their tickets and they can pass the savings on to you and navigate and find the best deals. The best deals. That's the Gametime guarantee. They will credit you 110% of the difference if you find the same row and section for less. And your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. So download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. JJ McCarthy lost 2 games throughout all of his high school career as the starting quarterback over those 2 seasons. One was that state championship game, and then there was another random like regular season game. And it was after one of those losses, he was pretty down in the dumps and pretty visibly down in the dumps. But he was already like kind of a superstar figure in this like little world of Illinois high school football. And there were actually youth players that like saw him already as the hero, as the messiah. And he would sign autographs for kids. This is like 16, 17-year-old, like signing autographs for other children. It's wild, but it's not that uncommon in the world of high school football in places like, you know, the Rust Belt, Illinois, Ohio, places like Texas or Florida, or even parts of California where high school football is as much a religion as church is. It's not that crazy to have that sort of larger than life presence. So he's signing autographs and he is pretty bummed about it, but he's, you know, going through the motions and trying to be good for the kids. And there's this little girl. He told this story also on the Rich Eisen show. There's this little girl that says like, you're sad. You need to smile more. She couldn't have been 7 years old. And draws this little smiley face on his hand. And you probably are familiar with the like smiley face brand that he has. He's got like a whole clothing line now, and he wore it all at his pro day and all that stuff. And he draws that little smiley face on his hand for every game. And it's the first time in his life where he gets this sort of like punch in the face of a reality check that the results of a football game aren't everything. And like the fact that he needs that at that age is already remarkable, that his life has been so tailored and anchored to football from childhood and onward that sometimes you need to remember that there's a world outside of it. And he found that really important and inspiring. And so he made the tradition to put that whenever he has that smiley face on his hand, it's kind of what that means to him. It's like, hey, relax a little bit. Life is a big and diverse and beautiful thing, and there's more to it than football. I don't know. It's a lesson I think a lot of us could take on, honestly, as we get too emotionally wrapped up in the goings on, especially in the off season, but even in the season, work always comes on Monday. Anyways, so he has that going on. And after his very disappointing junior year state championship defeat, it's 2020. And he was very excited. Senior year, one more chance to repeat as state champion. But then 2020 happened, and he didn't know if there was going to be a season with the COVID-19 pandemic. At the point he has to make the decision that he's about to make, it was very unclear whether or not there would be sanctioned high school football in the state of Illinois. We didn't really, you remember the summer of 2020, we didn't know if there would be an NFL season. There were people that were very sure that there wouldn't be one. We weren't sure what we were going to do here. We were Zoom draft, I guess. Everybody was still kind of figuring out, and there was still this sort of weird background sense that this was going to be over soon. And so he didn't really know. There was too much uncertainty. But in the state of Florida, they're running high school football. Florida didn't care at all, which is fortuitous that the Super Bowl was in Florida that year. But they didn't care at all. And there is a school in Florida you might have heard of called IMG Academy. IMG Academy, if you don't know it, it's a prep school, but for student athletes, where the most prestigious prospects go. If you're at IMG Academy, you are surrounded by future NFL pros. There's a bajillion people in the NFL from IMG. Go look up the list sometime. So he's going to think about transferring there. I should mention the tuition is almost $100,000 for a year at IMG. But they're going to figure it out. They're going to be okay. And he ends up making the decision, hey, I'm leaving my Coach Racky, I'm leaving my teammates and all my friends and my family behind, and I'm going to be, in Florida for a year, but there's going to be a high school football season, and, I can kind of keep my career on track. So we're going to do it. We're going to go to IMG Academy for senior year. And it turns out bad for him. Look, he goes 8-0. They win the national championship because they're IMG. But he does not look upon his IMG years fondly. He talks about how he was depressed, and how the sort of hyper competitive nature. You're basically playing on an all-star team. It's like when NBA players go to the Olympics. You're on an all-star high school football team. You are no longer the golden boy. Everybody's the golden boy. And it's a preview of college, right? Where everybody is this 5-star recruit, but this is this very hyper competitive. Everybody is unbelievably serious about football. And he really took to that and almost took to it too much. He fancied himself he's the protagonist, right? I'm Michael Jordan. I'm the Tom Brady. That's who he wanted to be. And more and more and more, his competitive side and his drive to be the best sort of buried his actual sense of self, his sense of personality, and who JJ McCarthy is. And really, even through this whole story, I don't really know who JJ McCarthy is, because his personality from the day he was born is quarterback. The quarterback is who he is. And I think at IMG, it just kicked that up to 11. And I think he really started to struggle with not having a sense of identity, or at least that's the way he describes it. And so he started looking for ways to kind of improve his mental health and his state. And he found meditation. And, whenever he says, whenever I get too crazy wrapped up in the future or in the past, meditation can sort of anchor me and ground me and center me on the current moment. So when you see those pictures of him meditating before the games, I think a lot of people clown him for that because it's not particularly machismo to do. I think that's super lame. I think that's just as stupid as making fun of Caleb Williams for painting his nails. Grow up. It's really important to him, and an important way to keep him kind of grounded in the current moment. Be where his feet are, right? But the true test of all of these life lessons, this ability to sort of remove yourself from the pressure of being the chosen one golden boy quarterback, The real test of this was in the Fiesta Bowl in 2022, Michigan against TCU. You probably watched that game on TV, and you probably watched J.J. McCarthy throw 2 pick sixes, one in each half, that were backbreaking, and they would lose that game by 5 points. But it's not the pick sixes that he learned the most from, which is usually what you would see. I made this mistake. Okay, now I know never to do that again, right? That's what you learn from those pick sixes, and you move on. And it hurts, and it's part of your story, but eventually you just kind of take what you can and you try to grow from it. But it wasn't that for J.J. McCarthy. He showed up. It was like the second drive of the game, I think, that he threw that first pick six. And it was a bad one. He tried to force a pass to with a lurking cornerback. Cornerback jumped the route and took it back all the way. Pick six all the way. Terrible, terrible, terrible play. And he was really pissed off at himself for that. Because in the blink of an eye, TCU was up 21-6 and it was halftime. And suddenly the Wolverines, who were 13-0 that year, they were the 1 seed that year. They were supposed to be college football's thing. And it was J.J. McCarthy fulfilling that destiny. He was supposed to be the number one thing in the nation. He was supposed to be the main character. And he was number one. And then he himself, his fault, nobody else's, threw it all away. That really bugged him. That really got to him. And he says, I got caught up in the emotion of the moment. And, call it a choke or call it whatever you want. But the pressure, I think, finally got to him, the emotional pressure of that moment. Because he comes out in the second half trying to force the issue. They are starting to get a comeback a little bit, and he does it again. He doesn't see a linebacker. He throws it right to him. Pick six. Another pick six, total backbreaker. They would end up mounting something of a comeback, though. But that would eventually, those two would very much be the difference in the game. So he's really beating himself up for it. But what he really learns, because that second pick six happened in the third quarter, and it really felt like the game was over. But Michigan clawed back and made a game out of it, and even had a chance to go ahead in the fourth quarter with like a minute or two left. Ended up getting stopped, but they had like the ball down 5, and they actually could have won that game. And I think just having that chance really stuck in his mind of, man, I can really make some brutal mistakes, but it's a long game, and I got to not get too wrapped up in those single moments. And it really helped him kind of zoom out. See that big picture. See things the way that 7-year-old girl wanted him to see things when she drew that little smiley face on his hand. See things the way that it helps him see things when he meditates. For someone who has been fast-tracked his whole life, you can see how easy it is for him to get too wrapped up in football. And so look, man, for a recruiter, for a draft scout, that's probably amazing, right? Oh my God, he's so focused, he's so dedicated, right? But as a person, as a human soul, it's a really important life lesson to be able to sort of take a breath, zoom out, look back. And I think it's a lesson we can all learn from J.J. McCarthy as well. Here's where we leave this now, right? Because he's now in Minnesota. He has lost 3 sanctioned football games in his entire life. 2 in high school, and then the Fiesta Bowl in college. That's it. 3 losses. Otherwise he's only known winning. And in the NFL, it's probably not going to go that way. Unless he's truly the phenom of phenoms that, he's been anointed as. But the NFL, all it does is give you reality checks. And as a rookie, he is expected to struggle because all rookies do. So when he's 500 or below it as a starter, whenever that comes, that's going to be the true test. How does J.J. McCarthy handle that? Has he learned enough in life through those little hiccups of adversity to learn how to deal with that? Or has this kid, who, let's be honest, has been the beneficiary of a ton of privilege, not had to deal with enough of that? Is that a lesson that he's going to have to learn? That's the question, right? We can go into all of the on-field stuff that helps us project that, but just know that he was built for exactly this. From college, from high school, from days before he was even born. I will talk to you all on Friday, and as always, Skol.